Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I waited till 9:01 for people like me who show up at 9:01 for a 9 o'clock event. So I want to thank you for joining us. This is the 50th anniversary of the peace treaty that ended the Vietnam War and led to the release and the returning home of the remaining POWs that were in Vietnam. And our Manatee County Veterans Affairs Department has put together a great list of people who are going to lead us in a pledge and an invocation, all Vietnam War veterans, and we have probably the most appropriate guest speaker of any of these ceremonies that I'm sure are taking place all across the country. You'll feel honored to be in the presence of our guest speaker when he gets up here and tells his story of his experience in Vietnam. So we're going to start with the invocation, of course. We're going to honor God. And we have Dr. Willie Holley here to deliver the invocation. And Dr. Holley is retired from the United States Air Force with the rank of Major. And he is a Vietnam veteran with 3 combat tours in Southeast Asia. And upon retirement, he and his wife, Sandra, moved to Sarasota. Dr. Holley currently serves as the senior pastor of Pathways Christian Fellowship, which he founded in 2010. So, Dr. Holley, if you would please come forward and lead us in prayer, sir.
Well, good morning to my brothers and sisters that thought it not robbery to serve this country. And we're so happy to see you yet among the living, doing so well. Let us pray. Gracious and merciful Father, we just thank you for having shielded and protected us through all of these years. We come today to remember the legacy of those who have gone on before, who made the ultimate sacrifice. But we should never forget what a great sacrifice it was. We thank you for these that have survived their trials and tribulations and ordeals on the battlefield and back home in this country. We come with hearts of gratitude. We thank you for your grace, that favor we didn't deserve, and for your mercy, for sparing us through all of these days. We ask you to bless these that are gathered here, that are yet with us, these that have given so much. And most of all, we want you to remember those families of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Crown them with love and prosperity. Keep them close to you, Lord. And I ask you, Lord, to bless the leaders of this county, this city, this state, this nation, that they will all remember what the founding fathers knew, that this country is founded on those Judeo-Christian values where we honor you in all that we do and say. And we give you thanks this day for imbuing us and filling us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that we may never walk from the shadow of your grace. In the name of your Son, the precious one, we pray. Thank you, Almighty God. Amen. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we're going to bring in our color guard. And our color guard is represented by Palmasola VFW Post 10141. And as they come forward, I'm going to ask Commissioners Ron and Bearden to come forward as well. And along with Jack Rourke, who's a Senior Veteran Services Counselor with Manatee County, they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag and the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Now we'll have the national anthem. And our singer today is Jack Cantwell, who is a Vietnam veteran as well, who served in the active Air National Guard and is also a retired New York detective.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight of the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
All right, thank you all, and you can be seated, please. I do want to make note that we have quite a few elected officials in the audience today. I see, along with Commissioner Bearden and Commissioner Satcher, Commissioner Cruz and Commissioner Ballard are here as well. I see we have the mayor of Palmetto, Shirley Groover Bryant. The mayor of Bradenton is here as well. And the clerk of our circuit court, Angel Coloniso, is here. And if I've missed anyone, I just didn't see you or recognize you. And so I apologize for that. But I think it speaks well to the support that our veterans have from our elected leaders within this community. I'm just curious, a show of hands, how many veterans do we have in the audience today? Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your service. This country, we hold ceremonies like this to recognize you, to thank you, those that are here and those that are not here as well. But the truth is, this country can never fully repay you for the service that you have given to us and for the freedoms that you have protected. So we do have a proclamation that's going to be read by Renee Medina, who is the manager of Manatee County Veteran Services. And this is a proclamation that was passed by the Board of County Commissioners. Was it yesterday? It was yesterday. I can remember something that happened a month ago, but yesterday I forget. But Renee's going to come forward and she's going to read that proclamation now.
Good morning. Proclamation, Board of County Commissioners, Manatee County, Florida. Whereas, throughout history, courageous men and women have donned the uniform of our armed forces and built a noble tradition of faithful and honorable service. And whereas, more than 58,000 service members made the ultimate sacrifice during the Vietnam War. Now and forever, their names are etched into two faces of black granite, a lasting memorial to those who bore conflict's greatest cost. Thousands more were wounded, more than 1,500 remain missing in action. And whereas, as the families and friends of those missing service members continue to endure uncertainty concerning the fate of their loved ones who remain unaccounted for. And whereas, Vietnam veterans contribute to our local community, state, and nation by offering skills, education, leadership, maturity, and dedication learned in military service. And whereas Vietnam veterans are eligible for disability compensation and health care benefits for illnesses and diseases the nation fully recognizes as related to exposures to Agent Orange. And whereas the state of Florida is home to more than 490,000 Vietnam-era veterans, of which nearly 10,000 are Manatee County residents. And whereas our debt of gratitude can never fully be repaid to those historic men and women who served, were wounded, or even died in battle. This presents the opportunity for the citizens of Manatee County to honor and thank our Vietnam veterans for their service to our nation. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County, Florida, that March 29th, 2023 shall be known, designated, and set aside as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day in Manatee County, Florida. And further, that the Board of County Commissioners do hereby extend greetings and best wishes to all observing March 29th, 2023 as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. This is adopted with a quorum present and voting on the 28th day of March 2023. Manatee, signed by the Board of County Commissioners, Manatee County, Florida, the chairman, Kevin Van Ostenbridge, and attested by Angelina Kolesko, the clerk of the circuit court. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to our guest speaker, Bradley E. Smith, Commander, retired United States Navy. If you've never heard Commander Smith speak before, it's something that you'll remember from today on for the rest of your life. Commander Smith has sacrificed more for freedom than virtually any other American in history. Brad Smith started flying lessons at the age of 15 and obtained his private pilot's license prior to enlisting in the Navy in 1961. He was later selected for Naval Aviation Cadet Flight Training and received his Naval Aviator Wings and Officer's Commission in 1964. After further weapons and aircraft carrier training, he was assigned to Jet Attack Squadron VA-76 and immediately went to sea on aircraft carriers Roosevelt, America, and Enterprise. In October of 1965, he departed for Southeast Asia on the USS Enterprise, arriving off South Vietnam in late 1965. On the 25th of March 1966, while on his 80th mission, Brad was shot down over North Vietnam in the vicinity of the city of Vinh. He was held prisoner of war from that date until his release on the 12th of February 1973. Almost 50 years ago. He was a prisoner of war for 7 years in Vietnam, including stays at the Briar Patch and the Hanoi Hilton. After his repatriation flight refresher training, Brad was one of a small number of Navy pilots, my understanding is 2, who actually returned to fleet combat squadrons. From 1974 through 81, he served 3 A-7 squadron tours on aircraft carriers. From 1974 to 77, he served on the USS Saratoga, seeing duty off the coast of Lebanon. And from 79 to 81 on the USS Coral Sea in the Indian Ocean during the ill-fated attempt to rescue the Iran hostages. From 1981 to 85, Brad served as the aircraft maintenance officer and as weapons system test pilot at the Pacific Missile Test Center in California. Flight test projects included live firing tests of Tomahawks and Harpoon cruise missiles, the advanced Walleye, Phoenix laser-guided weapons, and development airborne laser systems. Brad has been qualified as a test pilot, instructor pilot, instrument check, and proficiency check pilot in single and multi-engine jet and propeller aircraft. His personal decorations include 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, the Meritorious Service Medal, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 5 Air Medals, and the Navy Commendation Medal. After retirement from the Navy in 1985, Brad was employed by Lear Siegler, a defense contractor in the aerospace field, and attained senior management level positions. After leaving Lear Siegler in 1991, Brad relocated with his wife, Kristen, to Bradenton, Florida. He started a stained glass business and turned a passionate hobby into a business, and retired from the stained glass business in 2005. And it just goes to show you how you never know who you're talking to as you go around our town or any other town in this country. You could walk into a stained glass shop and have no idea what a hero and, frankly, a badass you're talking to in the stained glass shop. Brad is a graduate of the University of North Florida with a degree in business. He is still flying and building his own airplanes. He recently built an RV-6 and is flying his open cockpit bi-wing Tiger Moth, which he also built, and is very active in a number of aviation activities and veteran organizations. Brad and his wife, Kristen, recently celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary. They spend a lot of time with their daughter and their 4 grandchildren and other family members, all of whom live close by. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring forward our guest speaker and a true American hero, Commander Bradley Smith.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. No, it's great to be here, and I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the Manatee County Board. I'd like to give you a little talk about my experiences in Vietnam, but as of the 12th of February, the last month, was the first time that I had walked out of the Hanoi Hilton. The actual name of the prison is Hoa Lo, was built by the French back in the 1800s, so you can tell what kind of condition it was in. But it was called Hoa Lo, and we better knew it as the Hanoi Hilton. It's the first time I'd been out of the prison in 7 years without handcuffs, blindfolds, shackles, or whatever. Very briefly, that night, about midnight, I was in a cell with about 40 guys. The cell door slammed open around midnight. That's never a good sign in a prison. But unbelievably, the guards walked in with boxes of shoes, shirts, pants, etc., etc. And the next morning, we walked out on our way to the Gia Lam Airport and our ride back home. And I'll talk more about that later. I wanted to go back to prior to deploying to Southeast Asia. In 1964, I was a newly minted young naval aviator. I was stationed at Virginia Beach, Virginia, and a good friend of mine from flight training, he and I took a weekend off, went to Washington, D.C., which was not that far away. And while there in the hotel, I was in the bar of the hotel having a beer in the afternoon, and I struck up a conversation with an Army sergeant, I think he was a Ranger, who had just come back from Vietnam. Nobody knew much about Vietnam back in those days. It was under the radar. He had been one of the advisors over there, if you remember, or maybe not, that our first go at it in Vietnam was we were sending advisors over there to train the Vietnamese. Well, as we had our conversation in the bar, he told me that he had just come back, and I asked him how it went, what he thought of the whole situation, what about the Vietnam thing, and he said it was in his words, quote, a blank show. So I'll let you fill in the first word, but blank show. What he was doing was training young Vietnamese to be soldiers. These young Vietnamese, for the most part, were rice farmers who had never had a gun, never had a weapon in their life, and he was trying to train them. The sad part about it was that these rice farmers were dirt poor. They knew their government was corrupt. They were poor rice farmers then, and they probably would be, regardless whoever won the war. So he was very discouraged on what could happen building an army in Vietnam. Does that sound familiar to any of you, like Afghanistan and building an army in Afghanistan? Anyway, I was not very discouraged. I was not very optimistic after talking to him. In 1965, when I left the United States, very few people knew what was happening in Vietnam. It was just, who cares, it's over there, it'll work out. Basically, honestly, all I knew was that the good guys were in the south and the bad guys were in the north. We left in October 1965 on the USS Enterprise, sailed directly around Africa. Our entire task force was nuclear. I was on the Enterprise, the first nuclear aircraft carrier, and we arrived off the coast of South Vietnam in November 1965. I was a trained combat pilot. I was, ready to go. I wanted to see some action. You know, I've been trained to do all of these things, and I wanted to see some action. Really, honestly, I didn't think the war was going to last more than 6 months, no more than a year for sure. So I wanted to get my few licks in against the enemy before it was all over with. Well, I was only off about 8 or 10 years, you know, in my estimate of the length of the war. A few comments before I talk about my own experience. I still believe to this day that if we had wanted to win the war, we would have won the war. When you go to war, in my opinion, and I'm not a warmonger, I don't believe in just jumping in there. If you go to war and you're going to risk your young people, you go to win. If you're not going to win, don't plan on winning, don't go. Our military, our military people, regardless of the service, the Marines, the Army guys, the Navy, we had a few Coast Guard guys, the Air Force, etc. They fought to win. And they can't be faulted for anything that did happen in Vietnam. They did not lose the war. In fact, they did what they were told to do. If there was any blame, it lay in Washington, D.C. with the politicians, etc. I'm going to leave it at that. That was just my own personal feelings, my own comments about the Vietnam War. As I mentioned, I was a Navy combat pilot, trained to go fight at any time. When you go on board an aircraft carrier, if the war starts tomorrow, you've already been trained to go and jump in your airplane and go do it. I was flying a single-engine, single-seat fighter called the A-4 Skyhawk off the deck of the USS Enterprise, first nuclear carrier. I was already mentioned I flew 80 combat missions prior to being shot down. Part of those missions were in the South. We were there as ground support for our Marines and our Army guys that were in hot combat situations in the jungles or wherever they may be. And honestly, that was the most gratifying part of flying, was to be able to provide support and hopefully, and I do believe, save thousands of lives in the process of doing that. Our other missions, of course, were over North Vietnam, over hard targets for the most part. North Vietnam was heavily defended, believe it or not. Now, early in the war, not so much, and we didn't venture into Hanoi area. That was kind of off limits. It was very irritating that the targets that we were allowed to hit, Navy, Air Force, etc., were not coming from our local commanders, our generals, our admirals, or whatever. We would get a target list every morning or middle of the night from Washington, D.C. as to what our targets were going to be for that day. Not a very smart way to run a war, in my opinion. What I really want to talk about today is the 560 guys in North Vietnam. We had about another 100 Army for the most part, a few Marines in the South. And in the North, we had Navy pilots, about 150 of us, primarily Air Force, a scattering of Marines, a few CIA guys that got shot down in Laos. And besides all of that, there were about 100 civilians that were captured during the war. So in all, there were about 770 people that were became prisoners of one variety or another. I want to talk a little bit about what it took to survive as an individual, what you had to do, the mindset you had to have. I want to talk about you have to survive, obviously, and you're going to do what you have to do to survive. But we had to help others to survive. We had a lot of people that were severely injured, a lot of people that couldn't function on their own. Keep in mind, we were all, as we were captured, I found out I was captured, I was number 60 or thereabouts in the list of 570 guys that were captured. I didn't know when I got shot down, I didn't ever think about it, if there were any captors, any POWs alive. As far as I knew, when I got there, I didn't know whether I was the only guy and how long I'd be there. So this was our thing. Take care of yourself, survive. How do you do that? I'll tell you in a minute. Help others to survive. We did that through compassion for them. Communications, keep in touch with everybody. Try to lift their spirits. Try to know what's happening against our captors, the V as we called them. What are they after? They had interrogations all the time, sometimes torture sessions. And it also helped us to maintain our unity as a fighting force. And to resist, number 3 was to resist the enemy in every way we possibly can. I'll tell you how we did that. We wanted to maintain military discipline and unity. That was our goal. And we had a motto, which was developed over the period of time I was there, and it was return with honor. That was our touchstone, if you will, return with honor. I want to talk mostly about my fellow POWs and how we did things. I was fortunate enough in my Navy career to be a part of some outstanding naval organizations, flying squadrons, etc., that won a lot of awards. But I was never more proud of the guys that I served with in North Vietnam and the prison camps. If you looked at that mob, and me included, we were ratty looking, tattered clothes, dirty clothes, unkempt. But that group, I've never seen people that had more courage. They were compassionate for their fellow POWs and would take care of them. Military unity, we had no weapons, but we fought the Vietnamese, interrogators, camp personnel in every way we possibly could. We would not divulge any information to the Vietnamese, whether it be military or help them with their propaganda, without torture. That was the defining line. You're not going to get anything unless you torture. And they did in some cases. And they were tougher in grit. A little bit about myself, just to give you kind of a flavor, and this was kind of a repeat story with many of the people there, so it wasn't just me, it was kind of the way things went down. As mentioned, I was shot down on my 80th mission on a target over North Vietnam. I was a flight of 4, took off early in the morning in my A4. I was number 4 in the flight, and the target was a bridge across the river south of the town of, or city, a little city of Vinh, North Vietnam. It was kind of a routine mission. The closer you got, the further north you got towards Hanoi, the higher the likability or the possibility of being shot down. They had a lot more missiles, a lot more guns, etc. It's never a piece of cake, but this one was not a highly defended target, or at least I didn't think so. I rolled in from 10,000 feet in my dive, which is normally a 30-degree dive or a 45-degree dive. We're carrying 6 500-pound bombs, and at a certain altitude, we're going to pickle those off, and hopefully we're going to hit the target. Well, as I rolled in from 10,000 feet, the tail of my airplane was shot off, and now I'm in a dive. The airplane's on fire. The airplane is starting to spin, and I'm trying desperately to get that weight of the weapons off of the airplane, get the airplane under control so that I can pull the nose up and turn outbound. We're only inside the country by 5 or 8 miles. If I can get out over the coast or out over the water, eject and hopefully be picked up by a helicopter. As I was in that dive, all of a sudden I realized I was extremely low. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see the airspeed indicator was about 600 miles an hour, which is terminal speed in an A4. I took my hand off of the bomb jettison handle, reached for the ejection seat handle, and in a split second, a thousandth of a second, the thought came to my mind, because I was so low, so fast, and so steep, that it's too late to get out. Too late to survive an ejection. I don't remember pulling the handle. I don't remember anything about the ejection. Obviously, I was ejected out of the airplane at that speed. When I went out, it tore my helmet off, my mask off, my gun came up, and my pistol, .38, came up and cut my side of my throat. And I felt a slight tug. I was knocked unconscious. I felt a slight tug, and the next thing I know, I woke up underwater in the middle of a river. I was about 10 feet underwater when my eyes popped open and I could see the light filtering down through the water. I popped my Mae West, my flotation gear came up to the top. The first thing you want to do if you land in water with a parachute is get out of the parachute before it fills with water and drags you down and drowns you, which I did. 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm about in the middle of a river that's about a mile wide in North Vietnam. I can hear the dogs barking, you can smell the charcoal fires and a lot of other smells that are only common in that part of the world. They put a boat out from one side. Well, first of all, I took out my survival radio. It wouldn't work, it was broken. Threw that away. I had my .38 and all my ammunition. They put a boat out from either side of the north side and the south side of the river. The one from the south side got there first. And they stopped about from here to the far van over there, about 60, 80 feet from me. 6 guys in black pajamas, all carrying AK-47s. And I, by that time, had gotten rid of my .38, my ammunition, and I had my hands up. I was not going to fight my way out of North Vietnam with a .38 against guys with AK-47s. They looked at me, I looked at them. I'm sure I was in shock. It was like, hands up. They finally came over, grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, pulled me ashore. I took everything I had, my boots and everything except my flight suit. And they were not a happy bunch. That night they had a meeting outside. They put me up on top of a hill, and they were up there screaming, yelling something about me and the war, etc., etc. And I could see this one guy out there with a machete. He came charging up the hill. There was a whole bunch of people around this hill. He came charging up with the hill with that machete, and he was going to split my head open with it. And one of the guards took his rifle butt and hit him in the head with it, and down the hill he rolled. So they didn't have a lot of respect for their own people. I'm going to tell you very quickly, because I know I don't have too much time. From that time on, nothing in Vietnam moved during the day, because we were there with our bombers and et cetera, et cetera. So everything happened at night. Trucks moved at night, people moved at night. I'm going to jump forward about 4 days. During this period of time, I got my arms wired behind my back. Through every village I march, excuse me, they were encouraged to throw rocks and use some clubs. And beat upon the prisoners. Were, of course, blindfolded, handcuffed, or wired behind their back. I went to a place, spent the night, 4 days later, and during the day they would throw me in this dugout, had coconut logs over the top, dirt, and it's about 4 or 5 feet deep, and that's where they would keep me during the day. Well, the second day I was there, this elderly gentleman, white hair, not like mine, but he came by, and I had a guard, really nasty guy. His wake-up call was a rifle butt on the instep of your foot. But anyway, he pulled me out of there, and this gentleman spoke French. I spoke some French, but I didn't want him to know that. And so he started interrogating me, and I kept saying, no, I can't tell you, no, I can't tell you, no, I can't tell you. As this was going on, this guard was getting more and more irritated with the fact that I wouldn't talk to this guy. And so finally the older gentleman walked off and went on somewhere. The guard ran into the jungle and came back with a club about 4 feet long and about 2 inches in diameter, and he was going to whale me with that thing. And the old man, before he left, said, no, don't do that. So he made him even angrier. So I was standing with my face towards the dugout, towards the back, and the guard was behind me, came up from behind me, pushed me, and I landed face first down in that hole in the dirt with my arms wrapped, wired behind me. And I heard the bolt snap back on that AK-47, and I thought, this is it. This is it. It's over. He didn't fire, obviously. He screamed and yelled, and off he went. I thought to myself, and the reason I tell you this, all right, I've been here 4 days. World War II lasted 4 years. I've been lasted 4 days. I can last another 4 days. I set a goal. One of many I set throughout the 7 years of the time I was there. But this was my first goal. I will survive another 4 days. So first goal. As I moved further north towards Hanoi, as I went through each village, I told what happened. I arrived in Hanoi on April 1st, April Fool's Day. About midnight, I was laying on my back in the middle of a truck, open truck. It was raining, I was soaking wet, and I could see a little bit under the corner of my blindfold. We pulled up in front of this huge old door with old rusty hinges, etc., huge wrought iron hinges. And over the top it said La Maison Centrale, which in French means the main house, the prison, which turned out to be Wallow. From there I spent the next week being tortured and interrogated, had my shoulders separated, other unpleasant things. They finally threw me in a cell in the same complex which we called Heartbreak. Heartbreak was an old section of the prison. It looked like it was 300 years old. The walls were rust peeling off, concrete. Each cell was about 5 feet wide, 6 feet wide by about 6 feet long, 7 feet long. Had a concrete bunk on either side with leg irons and iron cuffs. Excuse me, folks. While I was there for a short period of time, as I mentioned, I didn't know if, excuse me, if there were any other prisoners alive. The second day I was there, I heard a voice from down the hall calling, hey. He said, gave me his name. He was an Air Force guy. I gave him mine. He said, look on the wall to the side and memorize it. That's all we talked about. Carved into the wall was a square, 5 letters across, A, B, C, D, E, 5 rows, 5 columns. This was the alphabet, and this was the tap code, which we learned, and this is the one we used throughout the time we were there to communicate with each other through 2 foot plus sometimes more concrete walls. I could tap faster through a concrete wall than people could do it on a typewriter. I know there's at least a few of you with silver hair out there that do remember what a typewriter was. But to say hi, you go, hi, H-I. And that was our main type of communication. I was finally taken out of Heartbreak and sent to my first camp called the Zoo, or what we called the Zoo. I spent about 4 weeks, 5 weeks in what we called solitary confinement. I was by myself. I could tap through the wall to one side. There were 2 Air Force guys in there. But anyway, after that period of time, they finally threw another prisoner in with me. His name was Charlie Baldock. He was off the Enterprise as well, different squadron. And we had a great time. We talked a lot. We were both young and full of piss and vinegar, and we didn't follow the camp regulations, if you will. So we were always a pain for the guards. Well, they wanted us to bow. They said that was their tradition, and we should bow every time a guard opens or closes the door. Well, we fought it for a long period of time, took our lumps, got our beatings, etc. At that time, the guards could beat on you anytime they wanted to. And finally, we decided, well, okay, well, we'll just nod. And we'll give them this greeting at the same time. Well, they asked us what that greeting meant, and we said, well, it just means, good luck, have a nice day, whatever it was, and we told them. So we did this for a long period of time. We would go like that, and give them the finger, and it wasn't until some years later when Jane Fonda showed up that she finally told them what it really meant, and we paid the price for it then, but it was fun while we could get away with it. I moved from there, Charlie and I, and we moved to a camp called the Briar Patch. Now the Briar Patch, if you know the nursery rhyme, the Briar Patch was the Briar Patch. No water, no electricity, guards beat on you every day, hellhole. Cold in the winter, 120 degrees, 130 degrees in the summer. I had been there about 6 months by that period of time. Now we're now from March to the fall of '66. And outside our cell door was a little concrete vat, which we dunked our metal plate in to wash it off. The food was garbage. I mean, they just picked weeds right out of the ditch wherever it was. I mean, it was not edible. Chicken heads, chicken feet, just gross stuff. You ate with one hand and you hold your nose with one hand and eat with the other one. Anyway, I'm looking down in this vat and it's about 6 o'clock in the morning. The water is still and I see this death head looking back at me. I thought it scared me. I thought I looked like I just came out of Dachau, one of the Nazi camps. I had lost my own guess. When I was shot down, I was about 175 pounds, in good shape, really good shape. I probably weighed about 115 pounds by that time. So I had lost 60 pounds in 6 months. And I like to believe it was muscle, not fat. Anyway, I only one more thing about Briar Patch. The camp commander of Briar Patch, we nicknamed him Frenchie because he spoke French fluently, obviously. Anyway, interrogations at Briar Patch usually ran a long harangue and then torture to get whatever they wanted. I knew that. I dreaded it, but I was called in one day. And by the way, living conditions, as I mentioned, at Briar Patch were so terrible. You never got it. There was no such thing as a bath or water or of any kind. They took you down to the community well about once a month or once every 2 weeks, let you draw a bucket of water, pour it over yourself, and that was it. So everybody was in the same shape. Anyway, back to Frenchie. So Frenchie calls me in, and he's sitting at his desk, and there's a little concrete pad. That's my seat, so I'm sitting lower than he is. Just a psychological thing. And I got a guard behind me with a fixed bayonet a few inches from my spine. So anyway, Frenchie starts off in his harangue. It goes on for an hour or so about why I should cooperate with them and denounce the war and sign letters and write letters to the troops in the South, etc., etc. Declare it, unjust, warranted war. And I kept saying, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And as time went on, Frenchie was getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And finally, I just said, no, I won't do any of it. So Frenchie got up from his desk, walked around to the side, took his watch off, laid it on the desk. And he said, I was a camp commander of the Japanese we captured during World War II, and I believe he was. I was the camp commander of the French that we captured during the French Indochina War, or the French War, and I believed he was. And he said, and now you Americans, we could get the Japanese to do anything we wanted to. We could get the French to do anything we wanted to. With that, he reached off, slapped me as hard as he possibly could, knocked me off the stool, and he screamed, you Americans, we can't get you to do anything. You're stupid. And I was, as I say, that was the only time in my lifetime I was proud to be called stupid. Anyway, long story short, I paid the price. Next day or that afternoon, I was tortured, turned my arms were behind my back with these old rusty French handcuffs just below your elbow, with your arms crossed in the back. As soon as your arms get tired, they start dropping down, and these cuffs would cut right into the meat. And I still have a few scars from that. Anyway, turns your arms purple and then black, and your fingers go like this. I survived it, and I thank God Charlie was with me. He fed me for a week or so, because I couldn't use my arms, and he took care of me. Enough for Briar Patch. Remember I said earlier, how do you survive? How do you survive as an individual? I want you to paint this picture for you very briefly. You wake up in the morning. You're in a concrete cell in a concrete prison somewhere else in the world. All you have is the rags on your back. You have nothing to read. You don't have a family. You have no money, no car, no nothing. It's you and your brain, and that's it. And how are you going to survive? You got two options. You're either going to get tough, and you're going to do what you need to do to live. Remember, we're not going to cooperate with the enemy, but we are going to live. And what does that mean? That means I will eat any garbage you put in front of me. I don't care how nasty it is. If the soup's got bugs in it, you eat them anyway because it's protein. On and on. I've eaten monkey meat, I've eaten rats, I've eaten many things. And you eat it, hold your nose, eat it, exercise, even if all you can do is raise your arms and your legs. I was so weak at one time I couldn't do a single push-up or whatever. You walk. You try to survive. You have to, sometimes those cells are 130, 140 degrees because they're concrete walls, 2 feet thick, tile roof, no windows. Maybe a little slit at the top. In the wintertime, it's so darn cold, the only thing you can do is cover yourself with a ratty blanket that you have. And unfortunately, if you're injured, if you've been hurt somehow, you're just out of luck. You are not going to get any treatment whatsoever. And that's where the compassion for other people comes in. Remember I said set goals. You get tougher in rawhide. I mean tough. There were times when if I had the opportunity, I would have killed some of those guards because they were meaner and nastier than a snake, and they just loved to beat on you. There were several times I thought, if I could take out 2 of them, I'm willing to sacrifice my life if I can get 2 of them at the same time. The opportunity never came, and thank God it didn't, because I'm still here with you. And you imagine the courage it takes. We're not talking movies now, we're talking real life. The courage it takes to sit down in front of a guy that wants to kill you. He hates your guts, and he wants you to do something, and you say, no, I will not do it. That is courage, folks, and that's what our people did. Compassion. I mentioned another leg of this thing was compassion. You've tried to survive on your own. You're trying to help other people survive as well. We had a guy one time, I was in a cell with 4 guys. One of the guys, unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to his military service, had asthma. I have never had asthma, but he had really bad asthma, and he would go have these asthma attacks, and the other 3 of us would have to sit up all night with him and help him breathe. Give him, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation because he couldn't breathe. We had guys that had severe back injuries, sciatic nerve injuries, you name it. And the only relief we could give them was to give them massage. We'd have guys that would sit up all night and massage their legs or their backs. I want to tell you this one. I hope everybody's had their breakfast. This took place some years into the experience, probably 5 years or so. By this time, because they had quite a few people, they started ganging us up a lot. And anyway, I was in a cell block with about 40 other guys. What is a cell block? Concrete floor, you got a concrete slab, that's where you sleep on a board. You got a mosquito net unless you've been a bad guy, and then they take your mosquito net away from you. And let me tell you, for all those guys that some of you have been in Vietnam, how'd you like the mosquitoes and the other critters? Anyway, we had 2 guys, been there a long time. I think one of them at least had been there longer than I had. And they just decided they couldn't go on. They'd had all they could handle, and they refused to eat. The garbage we had, they refused to eat it. And they had lost a lot of weight. They were skin and bones. We were all skin and bones, but they were the worst. They were skeletons. And a bunch of us got together, about 6 guys, 8 guys, and we said, well, we're not going to let them die on our watch. So when the food came, we'd grab them, throw them on the floor, put the food in their mouth. If they threw it up, we'd gather it up, put it right back in their mouth till they finally swallowed it. It may take 2 or 3 times, but this happened on several occasions with both guys, and they finally came around. We said, we're going to continue to do this, so you might as well just, eat. Because if you'd rather eat vomit, that's fine with us, because you're going to eat it one way or the other. Those 2 guys are still walking around today. So you had to be compassionate but tough. Resisting the enemy, I already talked about it. We wanted them to know, we're not going to give you anything. We're not going to cooperate with you. We're not going to be, turned against our country. You will not get anything from us unless you are willing to go to torture. They knew that, and we let them know that. Military discipline and unity, we already talked about. We had a senior ranking officer in every cell block. If there's only 2 guys, one guy is senior, and he makes the decisions. We followed a chain of command throughout the prison camps. We were able to communicate with everybody in the prison camp one way or another, and there were some very interesting things. I had several experiences with the Vietnamese and getting beaten by rubber hoses, but I'm not going to go into that considering the time we have. I want to tell you a story about a guy named Mike Christian. Mike is no longer with us, unfortunately. This was later on in the period of time. We had started receiving a little bit of packages from home, from the Salvation Army, etc. Mike took some clothing he took some scraps of clothing from different people, some red, white, and blue, and we were very ingenious. You have to be when you have nothing. We made needles out of chicken bones. We had, take thread out of a shirt or whatever it may be, so we could sew things. And we had received a few packages that had Kool-Aid in them. So anyway, Mike sews up this flag, if you will. We had lots of imagination, but it's, it's the right colors. And I wasn't in the cell block, but I know the people that were, and John McCain was in there. He was a friend of mine, but anyway. So every morning they would take Mike's flag and they'd put it up on the wall, and everybody would salute the flag and et cetera, et cetera. Well, as in all prisons, they have a shakedown every once in a while, and the Vietnamese found the flag. And Mike confessed that it was his. So they took him out, beat the hell out of him, and he comes staggering back in later on after a few hours with black eyes and split lip and whatever it is. And a day or two goes by, and Mike goes out and collects the materials again and makes another flag. And actually brought it home with him. So these were the types of stories, the extent to which we had to go to survive. I always set a goal, as I mentioned. I never reached that goal. I would set 4 days, as I mentioned to begin, then 4 months, a year, and the year came and nothing happened, so I'd set another goal, another year or 2 years or whatever it may be. But I always believed that I was going to get out of there. That was just my belief. We had people that believed they would, some believed they were going to die there. But I always had a positive attitude that I was going to get out of there. So as conditions improved toward the end, because the Vietnamese realized that because of all of the organizations out in the United States and around the world that were broadcasting articles about their inhumane treatment, they started fattening us up a little bit. They knew we were going to be released at some point in time. In the early part of the war, way back in the early 60s, mid-60s, they believed, and I honestly believe this, that they were going to execute every one of us, and they told us that. We're just going to execute you at a certain time. But because of all of the notoriety, they didn't. The B-52 raids in December of 1972. I don't care what you think about Richard Nixon, think what you will, but the B-52 raids in the Christmas raids in Vietnam in 1972 caused the Vietnamese to come to the negotiation table for real. For the first time, they could pedal their bicycle around the city on their way out to the prison if they lived in the city and see nothing but blocks and blocks of rubble. They would come to the prison camp with their eyeballs wide open like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. So they finally came to the table. We, of course, never knew what was going on. We knew some of the new guys getting shot down were from some of the B-52 crews. It was amazing. You're laying on a concrete slab in the middle of the night, midnight. They like to come in around midnight. It usually lasts a couple hours. You're laying on a concrete slab, and you can feel that slab moving just like you're laying on a boat when those B-52 bombed. And they would lay them right down outside the camp. The only thing we ever had was a little shrapnel came flying through, hit some of the roofs, etc. But this got their attention. Now I've been told, and I've read some of the accounts from the Vietnamese that said, if you'd have kept that up for another couple of weeks, we would have surrendered because we had no missiles left, we had no ammunition left. We could see that our town, our city was going to be totally destroyed. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, one of the guards came by one day, and they were not allowed to speak to us in English. They screamed at us in Vietnamese, but that didn't make any difference. He comes by and he says, Lee Doc To, who was the Vietnamese foreign minister, and what's his name? Our foreign minister at that time have signed. He said, Paris. So we always have somebody that's keeping track of what's going on. Nobody listens to the radio because it's just BS, propaganda. We always had one guy assigned. That was his job, to do that. So we knew something was up. A few days later, they march all of us out from all the different cells. Now we're in the downtown prison, Hoa Lo, Hanoi Hilton. They had brought back all the prisoners from the outlying camps because they were afraid after a failed attempt in 1970, they were going to snatch some of us up. They brought us out, and by the regulation of the agreement, they had to line us all up and read this proclamation, if you will. Now, the word had passed throughout the camp, and I'll tell you, the communications within our POW camp were fantastic. And I was part of that. I don't know how I got into it, but I did that the whole time I was there. Part of the communications team. But anyway, and part of the escape committee, we had a secret escape committee. You didn't even know who the guy on the other side of the wall was. You had a code between the two of you. Not a good deal. But anyway, so they lined us all up, and we had put out the word, we are not going to demonstrate, scream, yell, wave our hands, or anything else. We will go out there like military officers and line up, or military people line up. They read the proclamation that we would be released. Of course, they don't tell us. A week or so goes by, maybe 2 weeks. The fateful night of 12 February comes, and they march us out of the prison down to the airport. We're all on buses, and I'm running out of time, and they give us a warm Vietnamese beer. You know what a warm Vietnamese beer tastes like. I'm sure a few of you have had some over there. And cigarettes. So they finally, as we're sitting there on this bus, I see this Air Force 141 come in with a big American flag on the tail. And that's the first flag I had seen in my 7 years as a prisoner. They take us around, get us off, line us up, two abreast, and they march us through. They have 2 tables set up. One is the Vietnamese officials, the other one's the United States Air Force. The Vietnamese have to sign us out, the Americans have to sign us in, and at the end, there you see the 141 out there. So my turn finally comes. I don't know what the Vietnamese are doing, but I get to the end, and this Army or Air Force sergeant grabs me by the shoulder and said, "Let's get on that 141 and get out of here before they change your mind." And I told him, "You'll be running to keep up with me, buddy." Long story. But anyway, I get on the airplane. We finally get out of there, and I'm sitting backwards as we go over the coast of North Vietnam. Now, I had probably, over the period of time between the flying and the prisoner of war time, I'd probably been that close to dying at least a half a dozen times, if not more. As we crossed that coastline, what we in the Navy would call coast out or feet wet, I got a cold shiver down my back, and I said, I will never, ever come back here again. And I didn't. I have never been back. Some people have. They've been treated well, but not for me. What did I learn? I learned I was a lot stronger and tougher than I ever realized. I had gotten my act together about 5 years into being a POW. You could live on hate. You really can. And I decided, when I get out of here, I don't want to take all that hatred back with me. I'm going to leave it here, which I did. Thank God. We had some guys that just couldn't get over it. Their families suffered, broken marriages, whatever it may be. But I left it there. I changed. I look at it as a chapter of my life. It is not my life, a part of my life, and always will be. When I left there, I closed that chapter, and I'm looking forward to getting back flying in the Navy if I can, or whatever's out there. That's what I want to go do. I don't want to think about that stuff over there. We have a saying, or I have a saying, I got it from a friend of mine. Don't sweat the small stuff. We never have a bad day. I never have a bad day if the doorknobs are on the inside. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
So I tried to prep you for that as best I could, but it's hard to be prepared to hear that story and understand that there are Americans who walk among us who have sacrificed so greatly for freedom. It's a debt that we can honestly never repay. I'm going to bring Mayor Brown forward because he has a special announcement that he wants to make. And then we'll close out. Well, actually, you can close us out if you like, sir. All right. He wanted me to give you this piece of paper.
Thank you. Good morning, and we're just honored today to have Commander Smith, along with all of the other veterans here in our beautiful city, and along our award-winning Riverwalk, that we're proud that this park is here. You know, so as you listen to Commander Smith's story, you know, some of us were, I don't know if I would say lucky or not, but I was at a time when there was no situations going on. So, you know, I think all of us would have stepped up and served our country if we at the timing. But just it's an honor to listen to that and know what somebody went through for 7 years, and I just can't imagine and what we complain about for traffic in one day in our city or our county. So, you know, we just got to be proud of what this country is about, and those of you that were willing to sacrifice for us, my uncle is on that wall right there from Vietnam in '67. So I never got to know him, but it's just one of those things that you think back about what all of you have sacrificed for us and what we're proud to do. But today, you know, this park here, and I'd like to thank Lee Washington for all he's done for all of us in this city and county to do things. And when you look what we can do to continue to honor all of the veterans out there, but through this park, Don Courtney is a U.S. retired 2004 Veteran of the Year, Army retired. He's in the Florida Veterans Hall of Fame induction in 2019, Presidential Lifetime Service Award 2022, and former chair of the Manatee County Veterans Council. And this park deserves his name, and the city of Bradenton will be honoring him for that and putting his name on this park. So we'd like to thank you. So, and again, thank you to Manatee County, Chairman Van Ostenbridge, all of the county commissioners, obviously Lee Washington that's done so much for our veterans, and all of you out there that are veterans and have served our country or serving now. We appreciate it, and thank you as the mayor of the city of Bradenton. We're honored to have this in our city. Thank you and have a great day.